economics class when he was a freshman, and he was introduced to a concept that economists call satisficing. It's a funny word, a combination of satisfy and suffice. Wikipedia defines it this way: satisficing is a decision-making strategy or cognitive heuristic, a formula for making a decision that entails searching through the available alternatives until an acceptability threshold is met. When you choose the best doable option, you are actually performing a sophisticated economic analysis of your acceptability threshold and acting like the chairman of the Federal Reserve to promote the best possible decision economy. Congratulations, the Nobel Prize Committee should be on the phone shortly. Now, please pass the kung pao. The terrible twins. There are two types of problems that get people stuck on all the time: anchor problems and gravity problems. These terrible twins have trapped people many times. Anchor problems. These guys are just like a physical anchor. They hold us in place and prevent our forward motion. They keep us stuck, and if we are going to practice good work design, it is important to notice when we are stuck with an anchor problem. Nathaniel wants to go sailing every weekend, but he can't afford a boat. So Nathaniel thinks his problem is, how do I buy a boat when I have no money? Chelsea's startup is maturing and has stock growing 100% a year, and the company isn't naming any new directors in the near future. Chelsea wants to be promoted to director, and so she frames her problem this way: how do I get a director title when they aren't promoting anyone anymore? You get the idea. An anchor problem occurs because we actually define the problem as one of our preferred solutions. We embed a solution in the problem. In other words, an anchor problem isn't really a problem at all. It's an unnegotiable and, unfortunately for you, unavailable solution masquerading as a problem. We marry ourselves to a solution that just isn't going to happen. The way to cut the anchor loose and get free again is to reframe the problem and brainstorm alternatives. If we do the reframing steps outlined above, we discover that, buy a boat, is a single solution to a problem that can be solved in many ways. That invites us to reframe the problem as, how can Nathaniel go sailing regularly on his limited budget? That problem is actionable. It's bounded by Nathaniel's budget, but it has more than just one possible solution, so he is an anchor to something that won't move. There are lots of ways that Nathaniel can go sailing every weekend, and some are even better than buying a boat. He can go down to the docks and, for no cost to him at all, volunteer to crew someone else's boat. There's almost always a no-show on sailing weekends. Or Nathaniel can join a sailing club and have many different boats to sail. And so on. This example points out how reframing energizes the life design process. When you open up a problem with a reframe, it opens up lots of possibilities, best doable options that you can prototype. Learning interesting things about the sailing world and meeting lots of sailors and boat people along the way is a pretty fun project in itself. So it's not just about the solutions you come up with. The whole design experience, which includes getting curious, talking to people, trying stuff, and telling your story, is part of the fun of a well-lived, enjoyable life. Chelsea's problem can be reframed similarly. Examining the question quickly reveals that Chelsea is assuming that getting one of the almost extinct director promotions is the only way to be happy in her company. Again, Chelsea has embedded one solution into her problem and is anchored. Does she really just want to get promoted, or is she bored and looking for a new challenge at work? If it's the latter, we can draft a reframe like, how can Chelsea find a different role in the company that will help her learn new skills and maybe grow her career in the process? That really opens up lots of options. Chelsea can move to the same job in a new division, or retrain and take a completely new job. And if in the process of learning new things Chelsea learns that she really wants a bigger role in management, she'll have increased confidence and might decide to take on the challenge of interviewing in other companies. Again, the reframe opens up possibilities that energize Chelsea's curiosity and get her prototyping. Reframing will get you moving toward a best doable option that can result in a better design for your life and work, and that's what we're after. What we've learned over the years of working with people is that anchor problems are often about fear. Rather than trying something new and maybe failing, it is sometimes more comfortable to hold on to our familiar, impossible to solve problem, our anchor. The inaccessibility of that preferred solution is a great place to hide. We may not get what we want, but at least we didn't have to confront our fear of failure. Don't let this be your story. Be courageous when you have to be. Remember, courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is action in the face of fear. So it's okay to be a little scared as you're doing all this, but just try to keep moving and not get stuck. Gravity problems. We also tend to get mired in what we call gravity problems. In our travels, we come across gravity problems all the time. John really wants to be a poet, but poets just don't make enough money to live on in our culture. How can John make a good living as a poet? Frances has been out of work for 5 years raising her children. Everyone tells her that there is bias against people who've been out of work, and it's going to be much harder for her to get a job. How does Frances avoid that unfair bias? These are both gravity problems because, in life design, it's not actionable, it's not a problem. It's a situation, a circumstance, a fact of life, and, while it might be a drag and it probably is unfair, it's like gravity. It's not a problem because there's no effective action you can take, and if you can't take action, it can't be solved. The key is not to get stuck on a problem that you effectively have no chance of solving. Don't get us wrong, we are all for aggressive and world-changing goals. Please do fight City Hall, oppose injustice, work for women's rights, combat global warming, fight to end homelessness, support fair pay for poets. If that's your cause, go for it, and we wish you the best. But if you didn't sign up for that fight, then it's a gravity problem for you. If you accept that reality, be free to reframe your gravity problems into something actionable. Then you design a way to get what you want, and participate in the world in a way that is satisfying and matters to you. To help John, our frustrated poet, we must help him accept and then reframe his gravity problem. John wants to make a good living as a poet. Let's first accept that poets do not generally get paid much for writing poems. We imagine that most poets probably belong to the Starving Artists Club. And we think that poetry is wonderful and important and we really need more of it in our society, but John has to accept that it is not valued much in the market economy. Expression yes, money, not so much. Okay, a moment of sadness for John and our poor poets. This is an, except first, gravity problem because there's no there just like there's no there in trying to repeal the law of gravity. Once we accept the problem, we are free to ask John what he really wants, and it's obvious, to write poetry. That, in turn, can be reframed as having the opportunity to write poetry and perform poetry and to do as much as he can with poetry, thereby maximizing his expression without worrying about how poetry is going to make money. So a good reframe for John might be, I'm curious, how might I discover how poets enjoy and sustain their art while making a living doing other things? That opens up a lot of prototyping potential. John could check out poetry slams, he could join a poetry circle, he didn't even know that was a thing until he got curious and talked to people. John could write a poetry blog and start submitting his poems to poetry journals or, better yet, start his own poetry journal. John could practice some radical collaboration and start talking to literary agents who represent poets and authors. They could introduce him to professionally failed poets who found their way to a happy life as amateur poets. John could also reframe this poetry money problem another way by saying, how can I learn to live on what I make working only 10 hours a week so I can be an almost full-time poet? One of our students, Augie, decided to work on a problem just like that. His observation was that being wealthy means having more resources than you'll ever need. One way to do that is to spend a lot of time and energy on making money and collecting resources. The other way to do it is to radically reduce what you need. So he decided to do a radical reframe. He decided he was going to learn to live incredibly inexpensively, at about 10% of a typical person's budget, in order to radically free up his time. His first prototype was to get rid of everything he wasn't willing to carry all the time. He got down to 15 pounds of stuff in a smallish day bag about the same size as everyone else's book bag. He works 3 months a year to make about 10% of what his friends make, and takes the other 9 to travel and do all the things that rich people say they are going to do but don't have time for. He considers himself wealthy. John can take this approach and become the rich poet he's always dreamed of being. It's just a matter of lowering his need for money below his 10% income target. It is really about understanding what you want and how far you are willing to go for it. The point is that you are in charge of how you define your problem and how radical a design solution you are willing to build. You may not be willing to try Augie's solution. Most people do not consider it a livable option. But if you are careful about finding the right problem and you get good at reframing your problems in a way that gives you creative freedom to prototype lots of solutions, you will have the best available chance at finding yourself in a job and life you enjoy. That's all we're after here. We want to give you the best job possible and living the best work life and life for you. Reframing problems is your go-to superpower for both. If you get confused about the difference between anchor and gravity problems, remember that with an anchor you are stuck on a solution, and with gravity you are stuck on a non-problem. And by this definition, gravity and anchor problems aren't really problems, i.e., actionable challenges at all. They're either circumstances or unattainable solutions masquerading as problems, and it's they are keeping you stuck. Meanwhile, there are, of course, lots of legitimate, real problems that need solving in life that feel completely overwhelming. In fact, the problem of overwhelm can be so overwhelming, we've decided it deserves a chapter of its own. Try stuff. The minimum actionable problem map toolkit. Let's practice taking a look at our problems, a real problem in our work and or our life, and see if we can remove the drama and cut the problem down to size. Let's take a stab at coming up with our map. 1. Pick a problem that you would like to work on. It could be a problem that you are having at work, like the feedback problem we talked about, or even one of Gottman's professional problems for your relationship. But make sure it's a real problem, and one that you've been stuck on for a while. 2. Write the problem down as clearly as you can. Writing it out will help you understand the frame that is implicit in the way you state the problem. 3. First, examine the problem for any biases, embedded solutions, drama, or emotional components. This is challenging because we often do not see our own biases. To do this well requires radical honesty, a healthy dose of accept, and maybe the help of a friend. 4. If you are struggling to state the problem objectively, ask a friend to help. Read them your problem statement and ask them to help you detect biases, embedded solutions, drama, or emotional components. Let them help you find a couple of maps. 5. Once you have a few ideas about how to reframe your problem into a map, put your more objective, non-biased reframe in the form of a how might be, or how might I, statement. 6. Once you have a few map-ed problems, brainstorm maybe with your friend again at least 3 different prototypes that you can try to resolve your problem. Remember, we are setting the bar low here, accepting that a lot of problems can't be fully solved, and looking for a few good ideas for a resolution for the map. Best doable option BDO exercise. 1. Pick a problem that you want to work on or something that you are actually working on and would like to find a good solution to. 2. Brainstorm at least 5 solutions to the problem as you currently understand it. 3. Examine the options you've brainstormed and sort them into BTO and BDO categories. 4. Now eliminate your BTOs and focus on your BDOs. Resolve to have a biased action, pick one, and execute it. 5. Ask yourself, how do I feel? Remind yourself that, with that decision behind you now have more time to devote to other things. With that decision behind you, then be sure to separate the quality of the decision from the quality of the outcome. You are now free to tackle whatever is next. Go ahead and map your problems and tackle your BDOs. Once you get used to handling your problems this way, you should discover that you have more time for the good stuff and are spending less time mulling over problems that do not deserve the attention. 4. My overwhelm is overwhelmed. Dysfunctional belief, I can't possibly do all this work, and I'm overwhelmed. Reframe, I chose my way into this and I can design my way out. We're going to pause this book for a brief public service announcement about overwhelm. It's not going to be a long message, because if you're overwhelmed, the last thing you want to do is, well, overwhelm you further. If you're reading this because you do not like your job, and know there must be a nicer, richer, handsomer job out there for you somewhere, we would be remiss if we didn't explain that not everyone who dislikes their job actually dislikes their job. Sometimes we like what we are doing, we are just doing too much of it. We love our work but don't like our situation, because we are dealing with task lists and inboxes that are replicating and growing and invading our lives like aliens in a science fiction movie. We know we are getting swallowed up, and we can't escape. It doesn't matter what type of work situation you're in, corporate executive, small company employee, self-employed contractor. It can happen to anyone. Overwhelm is an equal opportunity ailment. Sometimes our work problem is that we have too damn much of a good thing, and this good thing transforms into a life-sucking monster that just wants to eat our brain, turn us into strangers to our loved ones, and maybe even make us ill in the process. So sometimes we are overwhelmed by too much good stuff at work. Not always, but sometimes. We can also be overwhelmed by too much bad stuff at work. And sometimes it is a combination of the two. The important thing is not to let overwhelm turn into burnout. We can help you design your way out of overwhelm. Burnout is a completely different beast. When you get all the way to burnout, it's almost impossible to design your way forward without first addressing its very real mental and physical effects. So, quickly, let's take a look at that. If you're not sure if you've crossed from garden variety overwhelm to burnout, know that the Mayo Clinic defines job burnout this way. Job burnout is a special type of work-related stress, a state of physical or emotional exhaustion that also involves a sense of reduced accomplishment and loss of personal identity. They have a 10-part questionnaire that you can use to decide if you are experiencing the symptoms of burnout. Ask yourself the following questions. Have you become cynical or overly critical at work? Do you have to drag yourself to work and have trouble getting started once you arrive? Have you become irritable or impatient with coworkers, customers, or clients? Do you lack the energy to be consistently productive? Do you lack satisfaction from your achievements? Do you feel disillusioned about your job? Are you using food, drugs, or alcohol to feel better or to simply not to feel anything? Have Have your sleep habits or appetite changed? Are you troubled by unexplained headaches, backaches, or other physical complaints? Answering yes to 2 or more of these questions might indicate that you are burned out or well on your way. So how do we get from overwhelmed to burnout? Mayo attributes into a number of potential causes and triggers, such as lack of control. You are not able to influence decisions that affect your job, such as your schedule, assignments, or workload. Unclear job expectations. You're unclear about the degree of authority you have or what your supervisor expects from you. Dysfunctional workplace dynamics. You work with an office bully, you feel undermined by colleagues, your boss micromanages your work, or there are lots of office politics that you don't understand. See the next chapter to get help with office politics. Mismatch in values. If your values differ from the way your employer does business or handles grievances, the mismatch can eventually take a toll. Poor job fit. Your job doesn't fit your interests and skills, or you are underemployed and bored all the time. Overwhelmed with tasks. Your job is chaotic and there is too much to do. Lack of social support. You feel isolated at work and in your personal life. Work-life imbalance. Your work takes up so much of your time that you don't have the energy to spend time with your family and friends. Look, ignored or unaddressed job burnout can have significant consequences. But we're not doctors. We don't play them on television. Or in books. If you think your overwhelm is really burnout and needs professional level intervention, then please go get that. A handy book from Design Guys is not a substitute for professional assistance for a diagnosable condition. Get some help if you need it. Now. Meanwhile, let's look at the run-of-the-mill sorts of overwhelm. Everyday overwhelm. General overwhelm comes in a few different flavors. Flavor 1 is what I like to call the Hydra overwhelm. The Hydra is a 9-headed Greek monster that grew 2 new heads every time.